Thanks for tuning in. I'm Joel Amadon.
And I'm Ann Monroe.
And this is The Teacher's Journey, Mile Markers on the Road to Better Teaching, a podcast series where we discuss stories of teacher development.
This podcast is brought to you by the University of Mississippi School of Education and is an Amadon Planet production.
You know what? You know what's good, Ann, is, if at first you don't succeed, you know what you do?
I think you try again.
Try again. Mm-hmm. So we tried to get our guest, Nicole Roberson, on before. Well, we did. We had a great episode. It was one of the best episodes I think we ever had. The only problem is I did not have the right amount of recording capacity on the SD card because we were together in a room. It was beautiful. We had wonderful exchanges, and my fault. So we're trying again. And Nicole, you've been so gracious to give us your time, and we appreciate it. But yeah, Dr. Monroe, my fault, totally.
That's all right. Round two.
Hey,
listen, we're all teachers. We've all had to teach a lesson multiple times. So this is sort of like, that
we'll hope
second
it gets
period,
better
right?
with each try.
Exactly.
That's right. So, Nicole, thank you again for spending some time with us on this afternoon. But could you just give a little introduction for those that might not be aware of the greatness of Nicole Roberson?
Well, my name is Nicole Roberson. I was a high school teacher for the last 20 years, teaching just about every possible upper level science class that you could have in a high school classroom. Most recently, I have joined the School of Education, and I am now an instructor of secondary science ed. I'm getting the opportunity to work with future student teachers, all of these future science educators. And I also work with the Global Teaching Project to hopefully implement a lot of STEM classes, specifically AP STEM classes, in a lot of our districts who perhaps have never offered these STEM classes before, or just perhaps don't have the staff to be able to make it happen. So we're trying to get those facilitated.
It's like a huge access project. I mean, just like the letting folks get access, letting students get access to these classes is amazing as a endeavor, but also amazing undertaking for you, kind of leading the charge here.
Yeah, it's been kind of a crazy adventure all year long. We have almost 30 schools in the state right now who are teaching some combination of our classes. Right now, we're offering AP Computer Science Principles, AP Physics 1, and AP Biology. Some schools offer only one of the courses, some offer two, and we even have one school who's offering all three. It's very rewarding to be able to give these students and to give these teachers this type of opportunity. A lot of our great teachers, when they're in school districts that are very rural, they get kind of prioritized to teach, the state tested classes, the classes that are necessary for graduation, which is honestly what should happen. But sometimes that means that, the smaller groups of your really strong gifted students may not have the access to some of those advanced placement classes that could be used to challenge them, that could be used to really push them, to develop just skills that are essential for life and just for further their education.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I was back in my day, we only had access to AP calculus, and we had somebody that was able to teach it. And we even lived in a town kind of like here, like right next to a university. And that was the only AP class we had access to. And just thinking about then going to the university and seeing there's freshmen that were registering as sophomores just because they had access, just having access. So this is pretty cool. Kind of excited for all that you're doing.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I grew up in a tiny, tiny little town that is very similar to a lot of the places where we are reaching out to. And we had just a single class as well. It was just AP Calculus. That was the one and only offering that we had. And so those of us that were kind of on that track, we jumped on it. Mm-hmm. But now I don't think my high school offers any AP classes. Wow. So that's on our list to potentially add to our group that we're serving the next year.
There you go. All right. And we'll put a link into the Global Teaching Project and any information that we have into the show notes for the episode. So, but hey, again, 20 years in education, long time. So, and then, thinking about your career as a student before that. So we like to start off with this interview countdown where we have an opportunity to do the little 3, 2, 1. So the 3 is thank 3 teachers who have shaped your development as a person.
So 3 teachers, this was really hard when I went through and just tried to identify, because I feel like I was very fortunate to have just wonderful teachers all the way through, all the way down to when my grandmother taught me in Head Start. But 3 that really just stood out: Mr. Joe Chumbly, he was my high school science teacher, or one of 2 high school science teachers that I had. He taught all of the life sciences. I had him for 3 out of my 4 years. And after my freshman year, he gave me the opportunity to start working as lab assistant for him. And so even if I wasn't sitting in his classroom taking his class as a student, I was getting experience working with other classes, getting to fill in with sections, set things up, grade papers, and really help just in the whole planning process. So that was just a lot of fun. It helped me to just kind of see things from the other side. And he was constantly there supporting me all the way through, even my college classes. There were many weekends when we needed to prep for something for a test, and he was willing to open up his lab and study with us or give us access to some of his lab supplies to help us. A second teacher that I would definitely throw a thank you out to is Miss Kathy Alexander. I had her as my 5th grade homeroom and ELA teacher, and then again as my 8th grade ELA teacher. ELA was not, the area that I really enjoyed. I was a science and math person, but I loved her class. She was always so welcoming. She always, looked for things to kind of pull out about everybody, just so that you would know that you were valued, that you had, input into everything that was going on. And she was just such a welcoming person. So even after I moved away from home, went to college, started my own career, my own family, she was one of those that always checked in on me, would check in with my mom and ask how I was doing, and, just to make sure that everything was still going really well. And then I guess my third one would have to be my clinical instructor when I was doing my student teaching. Her name is Judy Nicholas. I had the opportunity to student teach under her with the classes. I think we had regular level biology and also her honors biology. And she just gave me a lot of freedom. She allowed me to try things out, to brainstorm for ideas. She gave me the opportunity to fail, gave me the opportunity to see if something was going to work. And if it didn't, we would sit down and have conversations about, okay, why did this not work? What could we do, the next time that you, attempt this? So she gave me, free reign to really kind of discover myself as a teacher, while also being that nice support system just to help me, feel secure enough to take some of those risks.
And Nicole, was that student teaching through the University of Mississippi School of Education?
It was. That was back in the spring of 2000. I was in the first graduating class when they brought secondary ed back to Ole Miss and to the university.
That's awesome. But I also like about the first 2 teachers that you mentioned, kind of speaking back about those, coming from a small town and, making sure that students have what they need in these smaller schools that are under-resourced, but that you had these teachers that were your teacher more than once. So you had your 5th grade language arts teachers, for 2 different grade levels. You had the science teacher that was taught a lot of the different sciences, but how lucky to have wonderful teachers when you experience them more than once, and how important that is that every teacher is a great teacher, because you never know, is this person, how often is this person going to be working with you, and how many different students are they impacting? And particularly in these small places where you have a teacher doing so many different things and serving in so many different roles, the importance of having someone that's excellent.
Yes.
Because of that, repeated exposure, it's kind of neat, and it kind of speaks to what you're doing with your AP work in the state. That's kind of neat.
Absolutely.
I think too, and just seeing some connections too, because I think, Anne, this is part of your story too, like the trying on, like with your example from the first teacher, like trying on the identity of a teacher, like getting to see like kind of the other side of things where you're engaging in planning. And like, I remember I got Mr. Bolden I was a tutor for his class, but really I helped with planning, like kind of what you're talking about, help with planning, help plan field trips, and do all sorts of different things during a free period in my high school. And like, that's pretty important. Like, thinking about like, if we, we're trying to get more teachers involved, like how often are we letting our teachers trying on the identity? Because that is part of your story, Anne, right?
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, I kind of had an inkling. I think I might want to be a teacher. It was just sort of an idea I had. But I remember in 5th grade, it really, was something that I thought, yeah, I think this is what I'm going to do. I know that sounds like a really young age, but I was given the opportunity to work with a kindergarten class. I can't remember how often it was, like maybe on Fridays or like once a week, but I would go down and help Sister Frances in her kindergarten class. And I was assigned to work in particular with this little boy on sight words. And I just loved it. I mean, I had no idea, I didn't know what I was doing, but I just loved it. And I kind of thought I might want to be a teacher because I came from a family of teachers. And so it was an idea I had, but it really was sort of something that I could see myself doing and something that I saw that I actually enjoyed. It wasn't just an idea. It was something real. Once I got that opportunity to go in and work with that kindergarten class, that sort of, I don't know, made it something that was a more definite for me. And I really enjoyed it. And I saw some success. Now, I don't know how much success, but to me as a 5th grader, he was improving on his sight words every time I would go down. So that was really exciting for me.
So like thinking that going into our next phase, thinking about 2 reasons or events that led you to become a teacher. What do you got for that, Nicole?
Early on, kind of, Anne, like you said, probably when I was around 4th or 5th grade, if anybody asked me what I wanted to, be when I grew up, I would say a teacher. Most of my family, they were teachers, they were educators of some sort. And so that just seemed like kind of the natural pathway. I thought that I would do, math and science. I was going to do both of them. Not really sure about how that would all work, but that was my plan. And then as I, got closer to the point of actually needing to make that an official decision, I didn't consider teaching. I didn't consider education at all. I think, I felt like I needed to do something different. I needed to find some other, area in either math or science, something STEM related that, in my mind sounded like the really important job. And it's funny, I've kind of come full circle, but, at that point, picking my initial major, chemical engineering, that just sounded like the right path to go on. It was going to be this well-paying job. I was going to have all of these opportunities. And then I started looking during my freshman year at what a chemical engineer actually does. And when I started reading through just some of the, the job descriptions, I thought, this sounds terrible. This does not sound like anything that I want to possibly do. So I started, I know that I drove my mother absolutely crazy because I changed my major so many times. I think she was worried I was never going to graduate from college. But I did in 4 years still. But I put her through a lot of stress because I considered physical therapy. I switched majors, started taking all of these other classes so that I could get, the application process going, did all of these internship hours, even got to the point where it was time to start interviewing for schools. And I had that moment again. I thought, is this really what I want to do? If I could work with maybe athletic injuries all of the time, that would be more of the fun side. But when I started looking at just kind of the pathway that was opening up for a lot of the graduating physical therapists at that time, I thought, I don't think I can do this. I just don't think this is what I would enjoy. So I went back to, just a pure science degree. I was in biochem. I was here at the university, and it finally just dawned on me. You love school. You love everything about school. You love class. You love the people. Maybe you should give education just another thought, another shot at it. And at that point, I had been dating my boyfriend at the time for multiple years, and he was a math ed major. He was planning on being a math teacher and was completely sure about that decision. So I came in and I talked with Dr. Rock. I talked with Dr. Vinson, who was here at the time, and I made the decision to switch into teacher education, and to go into this area of becoming a science teacher. And I think my mom thought I had lost my mind. She said, "Are you sure? Do you think you want to do this?" I was like, "Yeah, I think I do. I think I really do." But even going into it, up until the point I did my student teaching, I thought that I would get the degree, get licensed, get out into the field, and then pursue the counseling degree. I thought that I would end up being a school counselor. But in my first week of student teaching, Miss Nicholas, like I said, was just such a wonderful guide for me. Let me just really kind of feel things out, and I fell in love with it. And within a week, I had called the graduate school and told them I no longer wanted to apply for the graduate program for counselor education, that I was going to stick with being a teacher and staying in the classroom.
Yay, we win.
It took a while, but I got there. I finally got there, and I never looked back. I never regretted it for one single second. I've absolutely loved, the journey that I've been on for these last 20 years.
Yes, amazing story. Thinking about trying on the identity, especially with the student teaching with Mrs. Nicholas, where, she gave you chances to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And where then you get to say like, yeah, this fits, versus like, some of those other, like the other majors, like I went through a variety of majors too as well, but like, mm-hmm. Those other majors where you graduate and you're like, well, now what? Versus like right. Education, at least you, before you leave here, you got to try this on. You got to at least see yes. Like, does this fit just a little bit? So that's great. All right. Thinking about placing a mile marker on the path to better teaching. So again, you said 20 years as an educator. Now we're working with teachers as a teacher educator. What would be the moment? Where would you place that mile marker on your path to better teaching?
So, after I thought about it, I went through and I taught, mostly biology and anatomy for, about 15 years, with an occasional elective here and there. And there were a few years where I taught nothing but, biology 1 period after period, or anatomy and physiology period after period. And I had just really gotten into a rut. And about the time I was going into my 16th year, I got the opportunity to go and be trained to teach AP biology and to take on that course. And it was one of those, I thought, okay, I'm really far into my career. Is this something that, I want to bite off? Because I was very comfortable. I could just walk in and pick up and teach, one of my other classes from any point. Just stick me in there and tell me where you are, and I could just do it. But I took on that challenge. I went and I was terrified, going through the school, the summer institute that they do, because it is so intensive. I sat in this hotel room for an entire week, going back and really having to study again for the first time in a really long time. And then I got into the class and just realized I loved it. I loved the challenge again. I loved having to, make sure that I was fully prepared, that I was having to really investigate, really research and look into the content again. Teaching that class, I think, kind of saved me from my rut, because it did have me just at a constant state of challenge. Just if for one thing, trying to anticipate the questions that my students might ask me, because no one wants to say, I don't know. I learned really easily to say, I don't know if I don't know it. And I'll get back to you. But no one wants to have to say it. And so I found myself trying to anticipate, what are the kids going to ask about? What is something that they may struggle with? Or, what is something that they may have just heard about on the news that they are going to tie into today's class? And so I was pushing myself and just kind of reinventing, just the way that I approached things in a class. And it was great. I loved it.
So what would you use to represent that moment? So 16 years in, so like, what would you use to represent, like, hey, here's the artifact that would represent this change in your teaching?
I really had to change my style. I had gotten way too comfortable with, here are your notes, here are a few questions, here is just kind of our standard routine. And at that point, I knew that wasn't going to cut it. I had to really go back and just reevaluate the way that I had been teaching. I don't necessarily feel like I had just left out a lot of stuff, but there were so many opportunities that I could have capitalized on early on that I was now kind of taking the risk. So my students in the AP class wanted to just take notes. They were happy. Just give us the information. We'll learn this and then you can give us a test on it. But I wanted them to interact with it. And so I kept pushing myself to find new and different ways to, model this or have this hand-on experience, or what lab could we do here? Where, could we go see this in action? What could we do to actually make this part, come to life, for the students? And really just helping them to master that content. If they weren't digging deeper and deep enough, then I was going to have to find a way to make them ask the right questions and to kind of guide them on that journey. So I think my biggest just piece of evidence there is that I just had to transform just the way that I was doing things in the classroom, just to make sure that I was being the best teacher for that content that I could possibly be at that time.
Did you have any resources or anything that and I'm putting you on the spot here, this is a off the cuff question, any resources or things that you're like, if I'm going to have them engage with this idea or this topic, like that was something that I used a lot from that resource, or anything like that comes to mind?
It's really funny. One of my best resources that I had that entire time was a Facebook group. I did not have, I was officially assigned to a PLC, but I was a singleton. No one else in the building was teaching the class that I was teaching. And so I could bounce ideas off of some of my fellow teachers, but a lot of times I was needing things to go to a whole other level. So I was having to find other resources. And there's a Facebook group for AP biology teachers. And it is by far one of the best groups that I've ever been part of. You can ask any question on there and you're going to get immediate answers and feedback from all over the world, not just the country, but all over the world, with things that people have tried, things that have worked, things that have been complete failures. You can share your own, contributions on there, and people will give you live feedback on, oh, well, this is great, but have you thought about trying this? And that was probably my greatest resource, just being able to kind of, rely on that. There were, I have friends who have previously taught the course too. And so they were always willing to help, willing to give me suggestions. But a lot of times I felt like I needed to kind of figure out a lot of it on my own. I needed to go through that struggle of finding, the right materials and figuring out what was going to work so that it could really be beneficial, not just to the kids, but to me as well.
Well, one of the interesting things, Nicole, is Joel was just in my 353 class this semester, and he was talking to the students about selecting artifacts for their portfolio. So if you were in that class and you were talking about this was an important part of your journey and something that changed you. So I'm just trying to think of like, what would you put as, like, my students were very centered around, what do I put? What do I put as the artifact? They knew what they wanted to say about it, but they didn't know what to put. So I'm thinking, Nicole could put a screenshot of her Facebook page from the, like, you could do a Facebook page screenshot as your actual physical artifact. And then she has this, obviously the story behind that. But I like how you're talking about you jumped into something that was new for you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when we do that, there's fear, right? There's a lot of fear around doing something new or different or whatever. And so this idea of that support network, and then also you being the only person, doing that at your school. So you needed someone out there. And so the social media gives you that somewhere out there these days, that if you don't have it in your immediate school. But I was just thinking, like, what would my students be? They'd want to know, what do I put? And then
Mm-hmm.
I think a screenshot of your Facebook page. I don't know what that would look like since I'm not on Facebook, but it would be something.
It's a social media platform that is used by.
You can tell me about it later.
That's right. Yeah. I can draw a diagram for. It's like sending letters, only quicker. No.
Oh, okay. Got it.
It is. It's great.
Kind of like email.
Okay. So you kind of, and I'm just going to ask the question. I think you've answered it, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Like, why was this mile marker important to your growth as a teacher?
I feel like at any point in my career, people would say, "Oh, do you think you're going to retire at this age or at this age or at this age?" And I said, I don't know. But as a teacher, I feel like I'm constantly trying to improve myself. I'm looking at ways, to just rejuvenate myself and to make what I have put together as a class better every time I do it and make it better each time. And so for me, I guess the biggest thing with the mile marker is that it really just kind of put a stake in the ground of saying, okay, this is where you're going to grow by leaps and bounds, or you're going to fail enormously. And that one, I just wasn't going to let that one be an option for me at that point. And so I just feel like I went through this huge period of growth, and it was a little bit later. I wish I had, picked up the class earlier on, but that wasn't part of the plan. It would have completely have changed my path, from that point on. So at that point, picking up the class, having to reevaluate things, having to look at things from all these different perspectives and just really push myself on a day-to-day basis, it made me develop into a better teacher. It made me grow, and just, try to find new ways of doing things.
So this is the fun part where we get to connect to standards and talk about why this is important to the field. And what's cool about this, this 1 mile marker, I think, it's kind of ridiculous how many standards I think you're hitting, but did any of those standards and the INTAS standards stand out to you as a standards that the field has identified that are important for a teacher to grow and develop? Did any of those line up with your mile marker or your growth experience?
Absolutely. When I went through the list, I feel like I could have kind of put something with a lot of them, but there were 3 that really just kind of stood out to me. First was number 5 with the application of content. Science in general is all about problem solving, and it is real life. It's very easy to tie it into something that is taking place around us every single day. And now the future of solving our world's biggest problems, it's going to come down to people having a lot of creativity. They're being able to work together. They're being able to, try to figure out this elusive answer that has managed to escape people before. So definitely that application of content, I thought was probably the biggest one, just especially with my biology content. The second one I thought was probably standard number 8 with instructional strategies. It was all about finding the connections. I had students that could probably listen and repeat back to me everything that I just said, or they could write it down and it was already completely committed to their memory. But I didn't need them just to repeat it back to me. I needed them to be able to apply it, to be able to use it, to be able to transfer that knowledge from one set of situations to another set of situations and be able to actually do something with that. Figuring out ways to make those connections was also where some of the biggest challenge came from. But I I felt like that was a fun challenge to have to kind of go through and figure out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one, I liked number 10 on leadership and collaboration, because as I moved into, that particular class, I did end up having the opportunity to teach another AP class. And so I was teaching AP biology, I was teaching AP environmental science, and it opened up this kind of little network where I was able to work with a lot of the other teachers who were also teaching maybe a lower level of environmental science or a different level of biology, where we could really talk through things and bounce ideas off of each other. I started to kind of fill in the role of being an instructional coach for other science teachers. And that just kind of, made everything start to come full circle. So I realized that I'd always had the passion for teaching my students and for working with my students and seeing those light bulbs go off. But then I started to realize how much I loved working with other teachers and working with, the new and developing teachers that were coming in, even the student teachers who were in my classroom, getting to see them kind of find that excitement and start to kind of figure out how they would want to cover things as they got into their own classrooms.
And now look what you're doing now. Right?
It's come full circle. It has definitely come full circle.
We ask our pre-service teachers to come up with a pocket-sized philosophy statement. So like a statement that guides kind of what they do in the classroom and who they are as a teacher. So we're going to put it on you. Do you have a pocket-sized philosophy statement?
Yeah, mine is easy. I feel like learning is continuous, and it's just an essential way of life. If we don't continue to learn, if we don't continue to investigate new things, then we kind of become just stale. I know in my classroom, I kind of modeled everything around the scientific method. You ask questions, you observe things, you try to, come up with explanations for those questions. You try to analyze these results and you try things. Lab days in my class, I know were stressful sometimes for some students because they were so worried about, oh gosh, what if I mess this up? And I would say, well, what if you do? What are we going to do? We're going to try to identify where it messed up and we can try again, or we're going to learn from the mistake. I just feel like that's just part of any classroom. Kids need to feel the freedom to make those mistakes and look at them as ways to grow and to develop, instead of them being just these terrible, just instances of where they feel like they are just shut down. Because I think the kids need to see that everybody's still learning, that everybody is still trying to develop, and that's just part of life.
Well, Nicole, I love how your pocket-sized philosophy is connected to your mile marker. And it's connected to, your experiences, because I think we always talk with our pre-service teachers about the importance of, and we have them start thinking about their philosophy early on in their program, because it's the guide for everything. Mm-hmm. And it ends up when someone's at the end of the program, and then obviously for you into your career, and you look back and you look at what's important to you, you see that it's reflected in everything you've done and the things that you think that you value, and it's part of what motivates you.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's really neat for, what you just said in your pocket-sized philosophy is completely reflective of the stories that you just told us. And that it's all, it's all together because it's what's important to you, and it's what motivates you.
Yeah, well, it is.
I was going to say it's also connected to, in what you're talking about, in like the making the mistakes and seeing that it within science. Dr. Monroe, you and I have talked about that with regards to mathematics too, is like the thinking that, the only way to be a doer of mathematics is to do it perfectly. We know that that's not going to happen. And right. The same thing with, science is built on mistakes. Like you got to have, I had wrong assumptions and I figured it out. And like, now we get to move forward with it. So, just that embracing of being a doer, that's pretty cool. Now's the time when we get to dump some resources that kind of come to mind when we hear what you've said. And so one thing I wanted to point out is an article I read as I think an undergrad, but it was on the life cycle of a teacher. And so you think like those first critical years about kind of the survival stage and making it to like, okay. And then you find your groove, around year 3 or year 4. And then you get in your groove, but then like you're talking about, that groove then can become a rut. Right. And then, but there is like in the life cycle of a teacher that stay in the field, like there is like something happens where there's some sort of leap in development. And it was almost like textbook of what you're talking about. Something like I'm going to take on a new course. I'm going to rethink how I structure my teaching. I'm going to take on a leadership role within my school and doing something, and like being aware that there is this life cycle, like even just, man, the first few years of teaching are hard. Like, yeah, they are for everybody.
They're very hard.
They're hard. But it'll get better and you're going to get better. It's not going to be just like, we're talking about with math and science. It's not like you're going to do it perfectly coming out of the gate. There is going to be some struggle, and let's celebrate the struggle because it's what people go through. Like, but there is ways to mediate that, and working with others and having a mentor and all that sort of thing to help you in those stages. Then also too, one of the resources that I've gone to for like thinking about instructional strategies and whatnot is a book, Joyful Learning by Alice Udvari-Solner and Paula Kluth. And it's just full of instructional strategies that are inclusive, that were taken out of the classroom and just basically put into this book. Not like someone just sitting there coming up with ideas. Like, no, these were used by teachers. And in order to have like all these different ways of, I've got prompts, I've got problems, I want to come up with some creative ways to investigate. I'm not that creative of a person. It's one of those great books you just dive into, like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's just do that. And then to have, and we talked about this with our students today, to have like 5 instructional strategies that you can use in your back pocket. Like, oh, I've got 10 minutes at the end of class. All right, I got a prompt and we're going to do stand and deliver. So it's a way to everyone get an opportunity to provide some feedback on a question through this instructional strategy. And it's like having those sorts of things like makes it kind of exciting, so that I don't know what's going to happen, but I know we're going to use the time, we're going to be able to engage around these tasks. And I'm going to trust my students to be able to interact with the content in some fun ways. So those are the 2 resources I had. I don't know, Dr. Monroe, did you have anything?
Yeah, one thing that you touched on, Nicole, is this idea that we were talking about, that failure is not allowed in schools, is sort of this message, this unfortunate message that's sent to students, whether it be explicitly, which sometimes it is, unfortunately, or implicitly in the way that we structure schools, is that failure is not wanted and is a terrible thing. And so it really prevents students from taking risks. So just sort of putting this out there for people to explore. I know it's kind of a bigger, broader topic than just that, but it's Alfie Kohn's no grades, no homework equals better learning. And so, of course, Alfie Kohn's a big proponent for no grading and things like this. But, and I know some of can be a little bit controversial, but I think it's just kind of opening your mind and expanding the idea of what development's all about and what learning's all about. And it's not about right or wrong. It's not about passing grades or not passing grades. And so I think that might be an interesting something for someone to explore. I also recommend some of his books on rewards and punishment too. Good.
And given, 20 years of experience, you might have some other resources that maybe pop to mind, Nicole, that you want to make sure to share. We'll put links in the show notes.
Okay. Off the top of my head, there's one that I have sitting on my shelf that I'm going to read, and I haven't read yet, but it's called Teaching Students to Learn. I got to listen in with a college professor, and she was speaking to a lot of our students through the Global Teaching Project, just about learning in general, not about content, and just really kind of prepping themselves in order to receive the material to the best of their ability. And so it had so many great pointers for the students to take, but it also had a lot of really great things for the teachers to, kind of consider, helping, the students to identify different patterns, just different ways for students to be able to make those connections and be able to put it all together. So that's on my reading list. I just hadn't had the time to dive into it just yet.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, thank you. And again, we'll put all those links in the show notes to all those resources. So thank you, Nicole, for joining us on the podcast. And thank you for tuning in to the Teacher's Journey, Mile Markers on the Road to Better Teaching.
This episode may be over, but the journey to better teaching continues. So please subscribe to the podcast so you're notified when the next episode is ready for a listen. And if you like what you hear, please rate and review the podcast. You can also share the podcast with someone you feel may be interested in these stories of teacher development.
And are you ready to start your journey to better teaching? Send an email to Nick Sisk, Nick F at olemiss.edu, the School of Education admissions counselor, to hear all about all of the options for becoming a teacher or an educational leader. Perhaps you are well into your journey and looking to further advance as a practitioner or researcher in your field. For more information on all our graduate programs, contact the University of Mississippi School of Education's Graduate Studies Office by sending an email to gradeducation@olemiss.edu.
You can also follow the University of Mississippi School of Education on social media.
There it is.
Like Facebook, those kinds of things, just like email, at Ole Miss Ed School on Twitter and Instagram. So you can learn more about the opportunities like free graduate application weekends and a lot more. Information can be found in the show notes for this episode at roadtobetterteaching.com. And finally, thank you, Nicole, for sharing a portion of your journey with us.
And thank you to all you listeners out there for taking the journey to better teaching. This world is a better place because you have used the gifts you have been given to teach others.